Hi, this is Kevin Gong. This is part 2 of my video on checkmate with the king and queen versus king. So in part 1 I showed a pretty simple method for checkmating with the king and queen, but it's not the most efficient way. I'm going to show some more advanced techniques in part 2 of this video. So the basic question is, how do you force the opposing king to the edge of the board? So this is another method you can use. You want to get the kings in what's called opposition, and once you do that, you can move the queen down to the same row as the opposing king, and it can't stay on that row obviously because your queen is attacking everything in that row, and it can't move up because your king is guarding all three squares that it wants to go to, so it has to move toward the edge of the board. Now you basically want to just repeat that over and over again. Now, in this position, you can't actually move to f5 because the kings would be in opposition, but it wouldn't be your move. The black king would just move to e3, and the kings would no longer be in opposition. So instead, what you do is you move to e5. Now, if the black king moves over, then you can just move your queen down and force it further down. And if it doesn't cooperate, if black moves to the side instead, you just chase it. Just move your king in the same direction. Eventually it runs out of real estate and it has to move back. And now you can move your queen down, check, and force it further towards the edge of the board. Again, in this position, instead of moving your king to f4, you can move it to g4 and then chase the king. And now it can't move here because of the queen, so it's either going to have to move to f2, in which case you'll move your queen down and force it to the edge of the board, or it'll have to move to the edge right now. So suppose it does, then you move your queen down to confine it to the first rank, and now you just move your king over and checkmate. Okay, so suppose we're in this type of position where we have the kings in opposition, but we're so close that we can't move our queen down to, in this case, e7, because the opposing king will just take us. And suppose, well, we say, well, we'll just want to get our queen further away. So if we move our queen to h1, that doesn't work either because the king will just move to e7, and then if we move our queen to h7, he can move to f6. So instead, what you do is you just slide your king over to the side, and now black is faced with two tough choices. It either has to move to c7, in which case you can move your queen down and force it to the edge of the board, or it has to move to the edge right away. So suppose it moves to c7, then you just move your queen here, check, and it has to move to the 8th rank, and then checkmate. So that's a trick you can use to even if the queen is too close. So let's try to use some of the techniques we've learned on a more challenging position. So suppose the opposing king is in the center of the board. So the first thing you have to decide is, well, where do you want to force it? Do you want to force it to this edge of the board or this edge of the board? So in this case, we'll decide we're just going to try to force it to the 8th rank. You could also try to force it to the A file, or any edge you wanted really. But in this case, we're going to try to do that. So you could just move your queen over here and do the same opposition trick that I just showed you, but that's not the most efficient way. It's more efficient to use your king and queen together. So you can basically just chase the opposing king to the edge with your king and using your queen as needed. So in this case, if you move your king to d2 and he responds by moving his king to c4, it's kind of hard to tell what to do next. But if you move your king over to c2, and now if he moves to c4, then the kings are in opposition, and you can just move your queen to e4 and force him further back. So suppose he moves here, you just keep chasing him with your king. Now in this position, you don't want to just keep going back and forth with your king. If you move your king to d3, he might move to c5, and then you just go back and forth and not make any progress. So instead, now's a good time to use your queen. If you move your queen up to e3, he can't move to e5 or c5, and he can't move to the 4th rank either, obviously. So he has to move to the 6th rank. So once you see this space here between the kings, close that out and move your king closer. Okay, and then here again, this is the exact same position, just one row further up the board. So again, you move here to e4, and he has to move to the 7th rank. And again, if you see 2 rows between your king and his king, then close up that gap. Again, you move to c5 instead of d5 to force him to move over. Well, if he does move over, then you can force him to the edge of the board like this. And then you've got him trapped on the edge of the board, and the rest is easy. Okay, so that was pretty good. I think that was like 9 moves. So let's look at another position here. So just kind of sort of a random position here. Now, again, the first question you have to ask is, which edge of the board do you want to force him to? So in this case, you might decide, well, I'll just make it easy. Since my king is over here, I'll put my queen kind of between the 2 kings and do the same opposition trick that we did before. Okay, so this is exactly the exact same technique we saw before, which I'll just go through really quickly. Okay, so but that, again, that's not the most efficient way of doing it, so I'm going to show you another way of doing it. So instead, if you move your queen up here, you can say, oh, I'm going to force him to this edge of the board. Okay, so instead of moving your king all the way over here and doing that same trick, you can just kind of squeeze him. So if you move your queen here, he's kind of stuck between your queen and your king, and he has to move to the C file. And again, you can squeeze him some more. Put your king on C3 and force him to the B file. Now when you're doing this, you have to be careful that you don't stalemate. So make sure when you're making these moves where you're not checking him that he has somewhere to go. Okay, but we made sure that he can move to B5, so that's fine. So now what do we do? Well, if you move your queen down here, again, he has to move to the edge of the board. You can't move here because you're king. Can't move here or here because you're king, and here, here, or here because you're queen. So he's forced to the edge of the board. And then once he's on the edge, you just move your queen over to keep him there. And then the rest is easy. Checkmate. So those are some more advanced techniques for checkmating with the king and queen. I hope you've learned something here, and I think the best way to become comfortable with it is just practice it. Just set up the pieces in kind of a random fashion and go through the moves yourself. You can play both sides or play with a friend. Thanks for watching.